Hi, I'm Dr. Mike and welcome to Nfgeeks. Well, this video is another video for Shakespeare Week, and the topic of this video is going to be the Merchant of Venice. And there's two main topics I want to talk about regarding the Merchant of Venice. And the first one is the obvious one, the one that you always have to talk about with the Merchant of Venice, and that is the issue of Shylock and the nature of Shylock and his motivations and the nature of morality and justice and how all that ties into him being Jewish. That must be discussed, and I think there's a lot to say there, of course. And then the second thing I want to talk about in the second half of this, or at least by the end of this video, I'm going to talk about Bassanio and Portia, because there's some kind of interesting NF stuff going on there that I found amusing. And Merchant of Venice is a comedy, so let's end on the up. And on the upswing on this video. So, but let's just get right out of the way the issue of Shylock. I talk about Shylock. In fact, I was talking about Shylock this week. I talk about Shylock when I teach because I talk about him in regards to justice. When I teach ethics, I give a lecture about the nature of justice, and I bring up Shylock because what Shakespeare does is that Shakespeare shows what happens, and it's very NF, because he shows what happens, one, what trauma can do to somebody, and how trauma can twist your need to justice into vengeance, and thus what the nature of evil actually is in light of that as it relates to trauma. Okay, and that's where Shakespeare's NF is really strong. And this is incredibly forward thinking, okay, for Shakespeare's time. Maybe not so much for us, but it is in Shakespeare's time because Jews show up in plays in the Elizabethan era and the Jacobean era, and their motivations aren't really talked about, and the anti-Semitism they were facing at that time isn't spoken about, and Jews are just evil. They're just sort of evil or doing evil things, or they're just not nice people, and there's no sort of explanation behind any of their motivations, let alone that they're good people. But there's certainly, it's very, very one-dimensional, and the fact that some greater point about pain and suffering and how that warps you into a certain way is very unique to the Merchant of Venice. Now the problem, though, of course, is that it's impossible to watch the Merchant of Venice without seeing it through the lens of the Holocaust. That is something that really, really makes this hard. Because if you change the ethnicity around or the trauma around, maybe it wouldn't be that big a deal. Maybe it wouldn't be so controversial. Maybe there wouldn't be this heatedness about what is the nature of Shylock. But the Holocaust has made watching and interpreting the Merchant of Venice almost impossible, because you can't help but to think that by watching it, you're participating in some horrible anti-Semitism, or participating in something that led to the Holocaust in this horrible, event of mass death and whatever. And so it's hard to separate that out. But honestly, that's also what makes it fascinating, because it really makes you question the nature of morality, and not just the morality of like the Holocaust. Again, Merchant of Venice isn't about the issue of anti-Semitism. He takes anti-Semitism and puts it into Shylock's makeup, but it's really about Shylock. Does the Holocaust excuse the immorality of an individual? Or is Shylock's immorality connected directly to his Jewishness? And if it is, in what ways? And can that be separated out? Where is the Shylock in that? And it's all very, very fascinating. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the stuff I talk about in class in terms of the nature of justice, kind of frame this a little bit. And that is that, justice is very much about owing. And that's really, when you think about it, justice is about owing. It's about making sure if you're owed something, you get what you're owed. And if you need to owe something, you pay what you owe. That's really justice. All justice is about those issues. Who is owed what to whom, and who should pay and who shouldn't pay, and why. Whether you owe something to society or whether you owe something to another individual, it's still always about owing. And that's why all justice is basically divided into two types: retribution and compensation. Okay, retribution justice is suffering. You have to suffer for suffering you incurred. Okay, so you must suffer. And then the other one, compensation, is basically when, because you suffered, you had losses and you have to be repaid those losses. in life. Okay, all justice systems have retribution and compensation justice. A lot of people hate compensation justice because, especially in America, because they connect it to our legal culture of suing everybody. But this is why we don't have feuds in the streets, because we have a suing culture. You don't have guns and injustices and people taking actions into their own hands. I don't think that's such a terrible thing. Compensation justice has been part of all legal codes. We have it because it was in the British law code, and the British had it because it was in the Roman law code, and the Hammurabi had it with the Sumerians, whatever. So I mean, everybody, it's always been around, compensation justice. Now, that's important. That distinction is important because what happens is with Shylock is that because of whatever he has faced in life, he has twisted those two things around into one another in order to seek vengeance. Okay, and that's really what's really fascinates me, how Shakespeare understood that, and understood that within the issue of Judaism, being an alien in an alien world. Okay, so what does all that mean? Well, first of all, the nature of evil, can be reduced. Anyone's evil could be reduced to this basic premise, which is that the person who's committing the evil, they feel that they have been unduly screwed over by the universe, God, whatever, reality somehow. Okay, some sort of bad thing has happened to them that they didn't deserve. Okay, and therefore reality is in its totality, with all of us in it, the rest of us is in their debt. Reality owes me. And because reality owes me, I get a free pass. Okay? I have a free pass to behave the way I want to behave because I've been screwed over in life. And until I've been fixed, I've been repaired, I don't have to obey by the rules. Okay? The rules don't apply to me. All right? That is the nature of pretty much of all evil, in one way or another, and that's embedded in Shylock, and in Shylock's case, it's because the anti-Semitism he has faced has turned him into this horrible, cruel person. Okay, he has suffered pain, and he's been miserable, and it's made him more miserable, and he's more alien, he's more outside of society, and he finally can't take it anymore. He loses his daughter to a Gentile. Okay, so he loses his daughter and his wealth because she takes the money, and so he's flipping out. That's why he wants his pound of flesh from Antonio in the deal. Okay, Antonio owes Shylock a pound of flesh for a loan. It means Antonio sort of made this loan to get his friend Bassanio some money, and didn't really think that what was that all about, with Shylock wanting that for interest instead of actual interest. Just didn't take it seriously. But really what Shylock wants is Antonio's pain, and that's the perversion of compensation justice and retribution justice being perverted into one another. Shylock thinks he's owed pain. He's been having to dole out money and stuff, and that's causing him pain. He's seeing that as being pain being taken from him, and now he needs someone's pain back. Okay, and that's the great unethical thing. You're not owed someone else's pain. Okay, that you can't be compensated with someone else's pain, but we think that. We all have our our list of people who we want a pound of flesh off of. And the ability of Shakespeare to understand that, and really now let's take it back, the ability of Shakespeare to understand that is a result of a process of trauma. That is really some really forward-thinking NF stuff going on. Today, it's not. It's just part of psychology. It's part of just mainstream NF consciousness. But in 1590s, this is pretty forward-thinking. It's the justification that, or the rationalization, I really should say, that Shylock gives is the anti-Semitism he faced. That's his very famous speech, where he talks about, if you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? Are we not human? And that's all true. I'm a person too, and I suffer too. And his view is that, well, if you have vengeance on us, shouldn't we have vengeance on you? And that gets into also a very interesting place about selfishness, because selfishness and egoism, when arguing ethically, is always about, well, you suck too. That's always the argument. The argument is always, we're all selfish. It's okay for me to be selfish because we're all selfish. That is the main justification, whether we're talking about just egoism or objectivism or libertarianism. It always comes back to, well, you're selfish too. Or you're selfish too, therefore I could be selfish. And that's that kind of very sort of rigid reactionary response wanting that pain, of being obsessed with wanting someone else's pain, comes from the trauma of pain, the trauma of being separate, the trauma of being outside. Okay, that basically Shylock exists the way he exists because he's been sort of driven into this miserable place through life, and has turned into this horrible, greedy, vengeance, person wanting vengeance and pain and suffering of others, due to the anti-Semitism that sort of surrounds him. But at the same time, he's using it as an excuse. Okay, he's using it as an excuse because he's really just mad at the world, and he's mad at reality, and he's trying to rationalize it. The hardest thing to reconcile is that even though you understand, and again, the Holocaust really plays with your mind here. You realize that, as Shylock has gone, like many Jews, all Jews go through this suffering. At the same time, Shylock is a horrible human being. He's a terrible, horrible, selfish, greedy, miserly, materialistic, terrible person, okay, who is so vile that at the end he really just wants to see Antonio suffer. He doesn't even care about the money. He just wants someone else to suffer. He wants to experience someone else's pain. He's owed someone else's pain, and he's gonna get it. He's sharpening the knife at the court, in the court scene. He's sharpening the knife. He's ready. He wants that pain. And is it, how do you separate that out? Can that be separated out? It's much harder today, again, because we live in a post-Holocaust world, to think about all these things, But if you listen to the stories of Jewish survivors, of surviving of the Holocaust, the Jews themselves in the Holocaust had to face this, because not all Jews in the Holocaust were wonderful people, and people did whatever they had to do to survive, and sometimes Jews did horrible things to other Jews, turned them in, sent them to their deaths in order to survive themselves, and and so horrible injustices against each other took place. Can you forgive a fellow Jew in the Holocaust who caused the death of other Jews when it's happening in the camps? This is one of the questions that has been wrestled with regarding the Holocaust for decades. It's one of the few things that isn't talked about, really, because it doesn't really come up in Hollywood necessarily, in various media images of the Holocaust. But how can you reconcile that? I mean, they're in the Holocaust. Of course, they're doing what they can to survive. But does that mean that does that mean do they get a free pass? Do you get a free pass to be immoral if you're in a concentration camp and it's going down in a concentration camp? Ponder that for the rest of the day. But that question goes back to what Shakespeare is doing in The Merchant of Venice, okay? Because he gives him that motivation. You could see Shylock's point of view of why he's so miserable in life and how he got to where he is. And isn't it understandable that he wants this pound of flesh because he's such a miserable person? At the same time, wanting that pound of flesh is so unbelievably immoral and horrible. How can you reconcile the two? So it's very fascinating. Now, a lot's been said about that, and I want to end on an on the upswing for The Merchant of Venice, because I'm going to be doing tragedy after this. Tomorrow's video is going to be on Othello, so we're going right into the tragedy. So I don't want to end on tragedy with The Merchant of Venice. So I want to talk about Portia and Bassanio, which is the other sort of part of the story that's taking place in The Merchant of Venice. The whole reason why Antonio gets into this deal with Shylock to get money, because he wants to give some money to Bassanio, because Bassanio wants to marry Portia, this beautiful woman, and he needs some money in order to sort of woo her, go to her house and estate, and play this kind of weird little shell game that's going to go on there in order to win her over, and he needs the money. And Antonio is very wealthy, but he doesn't have the money on him, so that's how come he gets the loan from Shylock, the moneylender, the Jewish moneylender. Now, what's interesting about Bassanio and Portia and their whole thing is that Bassanio's story in The Merchant of Venice is an ENFP wet dream. For sure. Probably an INFP wet dream too, but certainly is an ENFP wet dream. And I kind of laughed about it, about him with this whole thing. So first of all, he's a great guy. He's a kind, loving, giving friend to Antonio, honest and true to Antonio, but it's kind of a screw up. He doesn't have his shit together, and he owes money, and he'll never have enough money, and and he's in debt to Antonio, and now he's asking for more money. He's always sort of behind the eight ball on having his shit together. Although besides that, he's actually a wonderful person. Antonio gives him the money, and he goes to woo Portia, and he woos Portia. I mean, he has to play this game with that her late father had set up with these boxes, these caskets, and choosing the right casket. You know, sort of like, you know, which you choose the right casket, you get the girl. You know, choose the right box, and he chose the right box. You know, little riddles. And so he gets the girl, and the girl is Portia, and who would not want to be in love with Portia? I mean, she is beautiful, and she is smart, and she is rich, and she is wise, and she is clever, and she saves the day. She's the heroine. Portia gets Antonio out of the deal with Shylock. He doesn't have to pay the pound of flesh because Portia dresses up like a man and dresses up like a lawyer and gets everybody out of there, gets everybody out of the mess. So, you know, who wants to, you know, who doesn't want Portia? And not only that, not only does he get Portia with all that, because Shylock tried to do this thing with the pound of flesh, the initial loan that he made to Antonio is null and void. So Antonio doesn't have to pay back Shylock, and therefore Bassanio doesn't have to pay back, you know, Antonio for the money he used in order to woo Portia. So, like, at the end, Bassanio, it's all, you know, roses. I mean, he doesn't owe any money, you know, at the end. He doesn't owe any money. He gets the girl, and she's wealthy and beautiful and smart and brilliant and INFJ, apparently, you know. And what's great about it, and the reason why he gets her, is not because of what he has, but because he is selfless, you know. And this is one of the beauties about understanding of love and its relationship to wealth and things like that, you know, contrasting it with Shylock, is that Bassanio, you know, he has to pick these 3 boxes, okay, and whatever box he picks is, if he picks the right box, he gets her. If he doesn't pick the right box, obviously he doesn't. And one's gold and one's silver and one's lead. And he picks the lead box, and the reason is each box has something written on it, or written with it. And the gold box, it says, this is what something, I'm paraphrasing, but the gold box says, this is what everybody wants. The silver one says, this is what you deserve, and the lead one says, you better be ready to give up everything and lose everything if you pick this box, okay? And he picks the lead box, realizing that love is not about what everybody wants. That's something selfish, you know what I mean? I want you because everybody wants you, because you're an object that everybody wants, like a nice car, you know, or a PS4 or whatever, you know. That's not true love. That's selfish. Silver is, I get what I deserve, meaning I'm special and I only deserve the best because I'm, you know, really awesome. That's not love. But are you willing to sacrifice everything in order to give it up, and to give up everything in order to have this love, you know? Then that's what you should do. And he picks that one. Now, the thing that amuses me about it regarding ENFP is that he understands that. Now, the irony is that he doesn't have much. I mean, he had to get a loan again, you know, from Antonio to get here, you know, to do this. He doesn't have much to sacrifice, but he is willing to sacrifice whatever he has. He understands that even as little as it is, he'll still give it all up for love of Portia, because he does truly love her, and he wants to be with her, and he's willing to just give it all up, you know, for her. And that's what love is really all about. It's about the giving up of something and willing to sacrifice and lose something, not necessarily gaining something, which is what the other 2 boxes were sort of saying that love is, and that's why they were the wrong answers. Okay, so he does that, and then the best part about this thing with Portia and Bassanio is that, you know, he in the end lets her sort of decide. He sort of, you know, gives her the freedom to choose. That's something else, you know. And the other choices, the other guy, there were other suitors before him, these people, you know, and she was sort of an object to be had, very much the way Shylock viewed his daughter, money, life, you know, the opposite of Shylock's view. But he even though he won, and by the rules of the contest he could have her, he in the end lets her choose him and says, you know, if you choose me, I will have you, whatever. And he turns it back on her and frees her. And in doing that, you know, he could have lost her. That's what it means to sacrifice everything, to give everything up. He, in giving her the final say, she could say, you know, because she could have said, you know, you're cute and all, but what's about all this money you own this Antonio guy? You know, so he allows her to make that free choice, you know, showing that he's willing to put it all on the line, and of course it works out, and she's thrilled with him. And it just makes me laugh because I think, boy, again, Portia is an ENFP wet dream, you know, in all the ways. Boy, to have a Portia in your life, who wouldn't want Portia? How could you say no to Portia? I don't know. For Portia, though, I don't know. You know, if he's an ENFP, I don't know how happy she's going to be. But, and here's again why it's wishful thinking, is that in the play, Portia is thrilled that Bassanio shows up because she knew him beforehand, is thrilled that he loves her, and is thrilled that he is the winner. She is the one, you know, so I mean, it's even better, you know, for him, you know. So, I guess that's it. I hope that we all, at least all us NFPs, I think an INFP might have a similar situation with as Bassanio, but certainly ENFPs. As an ENFP, I definitely identify with Bassanio. May we all find our Portias, you know, and also to leave you with this, not to get serious again, but to really wonder, you know, are you really owed a pound of flesh? You know, think about the people who you want to suffer. Those are people you want a pound of flesh from. Are you really owed that pain? Are you really owed someone else's pain, someone else's pound of flesh? You know, ponder that, and then dream of having a sweet Portia in your life. All right, well, thanks for watching. Tomorrow night will be Othello. We get into tragedy with the next video. As always, thanks for watching. Come follow Nfgeeks on Twitter and Tumblr, and come join the fun on the Nfgeeks Facebook forum. You can win a free MBTI typing by me, a consultation by me with the real MBTI, or you can pay for a consultation session. It's the cheapest on the internet, I swear to you. And as always, it's happening at Nfgeeks, so come join the fun, especially if your name happens to be Portia.